hit me like a freight train. I should have seen it coming, right? All the signs were there, staring me in the face like glowing red alarms, but I didn't want to believe it. Her name was Rachel, my wife of 8 years. The same woman I thought was everything to me. At first glance, you'd think she was sweet, attentive, a little bit of a flirt with everyone, but never that kind of flirt. I was wrong. So damn wrong. The affair? It wasn't some subtle, slow-building betrayal. No, it exploded into my face like a firework that I had been stupid enough to light. Started with a simple night out, a Friday just like any other. I'd been coming home from work later than usual, drowning in deadlines and the never-ending grind of the office. Rachel told me she was going out with some girlfriends. Sure, why not? She deserved a break. But I should have known. The way she lingered in front of the mirror a little too long, fixing her hair like she was prepping for a photo shoot. The scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, a scent she hadn't worn in months, was thick in the air, lingering like a ghost after she walked out the door. Something was off, but I shrugged it off. I had always trusted her. Blindly. That night was when the world began to slip from under my feet. I wasn't supposed to come back home early, but I did. It was an ordinary mistake. The office had a power outage and I thought I'd surprise her. I walked in, expecting her to still be out, but the house wasn't empty. At first, I thought it was a dream. A nightmare, really. The sounds coming from the living room were undeniable, raw, and too real to ignore. I wasn't a fool. I knew what those sounds meant. I couldn't move for a second, frozen, listening to my heart pound in my ears. Then I saw them. Him. Some young guy, his shirt barely on, his face a picture of arrogant satisfaction. And Rachel looking as though she didn't give a damn that I was standing there. Her husband, like I was nothing more than a piece of old furniture. "Daniel," she said with that icy tone, her eyes as cold as stone. "You're early." No apology, no shock, just that flat, cold voice. My mind went blank. It was like I had been shoved into some twisted movie, and I was the idiot who hadn't figured out the plot yet. I couldn't believe this was happening. Couldn't process that the woman I'd loved for so long was standing there. Indifferent, caught in the act like it was no big deal. The guy, Justin, or whatever the hell his name was, didn't even flinch. He gave me a smug smile like he knew something I didn't, like he was above me. That look on his face made me want to tear him apart, but I couldn't even move. "Who the hell is this?" I finally managed to choke out, though my voice cracked in a way that I hated. Rachel just shrugged, like I was an inconvenience, like I had walked in on her fixing her makeup instead of, well, you know, she didn't even try to cover it up. "This is Justin." "It's not what you think," she said, but her tone screamed that she didn't care what I thought. There was no remorse in her eyes, no guilt, just cold calculation. I wanted to scream, to yell at her, demand answers, but the words got stuck in my throat. How could she do this? How could she throw away everything we had? And for what? Some young punk who looked like he was barely out of college? I stormed out before I could explode, slamming the door so hard I thought the windows might shatter. My hands were shaking, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. This was the woman I had promised my life to, the woman I had built my world around. And now I didn't even know who she was anymore. That was just the beginning. Little did I know, this was only a small glimpse of the chaos about to unfold. I drove around aimlessly that night, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and rage. The city lights blurred past me, but I barely noticed them. All I could see was Rachel, my wife, acting like I was the one inconveniencing her by walking into my own house. It felt like a punch to the gut, knowing that this wasn't some momentary lapse of judgment. No, her coldness, her indifference, it all pointed to one thing. This wasn't the first time. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. Justin, or whatever his name was, didn't even bother to apologize or look embarrassed. It was like I didn't matter, like my existence was irrelevant to both of them. I pulled over to a gas station parking lot, staring blankly ahead. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out when things went wrong. When did she stop loving me? Was it my late nights at work? Was I not enough? Was it ever real? My thoughts spiraled down a dark path, and for a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Then, as if the universe hadn't kicked me enough, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen, and it was a message from Rachel. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear more lies or excuses, but I did. It was short, cold, and sharp. "We need to talk." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just those words, like she had already planned what was coming next. And I had no choice but to go along with it. I wanted to throw my phone out the window. I wanted to drive back home and scream at her, demand answers, but something in me stopped. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Fear of what she would say. Fear of hearing something that would break me even more than I already was. But I couldn't ignore it. Not after what I had just seen. I needed to confront her, to hear her admit it, to hear her say it out loud so I could finally know the truth. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, gathering the strength to return home. When I finally did, the house was silent. No sign of Justin. Good, because if I had seen him again, I don't know what I would have done. Rachel was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Rachel," I said, my voice hoarse and strained. "We need to talk." She raised an eyebrow, as if this whole thing was beneath her. "I already texted you that." The arrogance in her voice made my blood boil. I could barely hold it together, but I had to stay calm. I needed answers, not more chaos. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, as if I had asked her what she had for dinner last night. "A few months, maybe longer." Maybe longer? The way she said it, so nonchalantly, it was like she didn't even care about the weight of her words, about the wreckage she was leaving behind. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like someone had stabbed me with a dagger and was slowly twisting it. "And you don't care? About us? About what this does to me?" I was on the edge, my voice breaking with a mixture of anger and despair. Rachel finally put down her phone and looked at me, but the look in her eyes wasn't one of remorse or guilt. It was impatience, like she was tired of this conversation before it even began. "Daniel, stop being dramatic. Things change. People change. You work all the time. I got bored. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." That's when I lost it. "Not a big deal? You cheated on me. With some kid. And you act like it's nothing? Like we're nothing." Her face twisted into a smirk, a cruel one that made me want to scream. "Oh, grow up. You're acting like I'm the first woman to ever get a little side action. You think you're some saint? Please." My heart dropped. What was she implying? Was she accusing me of something now? I shook my head, trying to stay focused. "This isn't about me. This is about what you did." Rachel rolled her eyes, and it was like she had rehearsed this moment, ready to gaslight me into thinking it was all my fault. "Look, I'm not saying I was perfect, but you haven't exactly been the world's greatest husband either, Daniel. Always working late, always too tired for anything fun. What did you expect? For me to sit around and wait for you to finally pay attention to me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like she had flipped the script, and now I was the one being blamed for her infidelity. "And Justin? What is he to you?" I demanded, my voice rising again. "Is he your boyfriend now? Or is he just one of many?" Rachel laughed, a cold, humorless laugh. "Don't flatter yourself. Justin's fun, that's all. I don't owe you any more explanations than that." I stood there, stunned. As she leaned back on the couch, her expression bored. It was clear that, in her mind, this conversation was over. She didn't care about what I felt. She didn't care about us. And that was the moment I realized, this wasn't just a betrayal. This was who she was. A liar. A selfish, heartless liar. And I was nothing more than a fool who had wasted years of my life on her. I couldn't believe how calm she was, how nonchalant about the destruction she'd caused. Rachel sat there as if this whole conversation was just another minor inconvenience in her day. I was losing it inside, barely holding myself together. My heart raced, hands clenched into fists. How could she sit there so casually after everything? I felt like my entire world was collapsing, and she couldn't care less. Fun? That's all it is to you, I said, my voice cracking from the weight of it all. You've destroyed everything for some fun? Rachel glanced at me, her eyes as cold as ice. Daniel, you're acting like the world's ending. It's not. You'll be fine. I've had my fun, and now you can either get over it or not. Your choice. Her words cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. Get over it? Was she serious? I had given this woman everything, my loyalty, my trust, my life, and now she was treating me like I was disposable, like I was a nuisance for caring. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the damage she'd done. But deep down, I knew nothing I said would make a difference. She didn't care. I paced around the room, trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed enough. Rachel, we had a life together. We built this. How can you just throw it all away like it means nothing to you? She sighed, clearly irritated by my persistence. Oh, please, don't act like this marriage was perfect. It hasn't been for a long time, Daniel, and you know it. I'm not the only one who stopped caring. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I knew better than to take the bait. This was classic Rachel, turning the blame around, making me feel like the villain. She'd always had a way of doing that, twisting things just enough so that I questioned myself, even when she was in the wrong. Stopped caring. I shot back, my voice full of disbelief. I was working to provide for us. I was here trying to build something real, something stable. You're the one who checked out, Rachel. You're the one who started lying, sneaking around. She stood up then, finally looking me in the eye. But there wasn't an ounce of remorse in her expression. No apology, no regret, just anger, thinly veiled beneath her calm exterior. I didn't sneak around, Daniel, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I just found what I needed somewhere else because you weren't giving it to me. And if you think I'm going to sit here and feel guilty for that, think again. My stomach twisted into knots. She wasn't just lying. She was rewriting history, turning herself into the victim, making it seem like I had forced her into this affair. It was like I was talking to a stranger, someone completely disconnected from reality. Rachel, I gave you everything. I loved you, I said, my voice almost a whisper now, drained from the emotional roller coaster. She laughed. A bitter, mocking laugh that sent chills down my spine. Love? You think this is about love? Daniel, love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't fix boredom. Love doesn't make me feel alive. You think coming home late every night, too tired to even talk, was love? My heart sank. The truth was spilling out now, her real feelings finally exposed. She didn't just cheat. She never loved me, not in the way I thought she did. And now everything was unraveling. I was seeing her for who she truly was. A selfish, manipulative woman who had never cared about anyone but herself. I could feel my blood boiling, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Not anymore. So what now? I asked, my voice tight. You're just going to walk away from all of this? From us? For what, Justin? She scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Justin's a distraction. He's not the issue here, Daniel. The issue is that I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm done with this boring, predictable life. I need excitement. I need more. There it was. The truth, raw and ugly, sitting between us like a ticking time bomb. She didn't want me. She didn't want the life we had built together. She wanted more, whatever that meant. And the worst part? She didn't care who she destroyed to get it. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. After everything we've been through, this is how it ends? With you chasing some thrill, like none of it mattered. Rachel rolled her eyes, clearly done with the conversation. Look, Daniel, I don't expect you to understand. We're different people now. I've changed. And if you can't accept that, maybe it's time for both of us to move on. I stood there, staring at her, the woman I had spent years building a life with, and all I could think was, how had it come to this? How had I missed the signs? The lies, the manipulation, the utter lack of respect for everything we had shared. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way she saw me now, like I was nothing, like I didn't matter at all. And in that moment, I realized this marriage was over. Not because of the affair, not because of Justin or whatever other men she'd probably been with. It was over because Rachel had become someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want to be with anymore. But walking away, that wasn't going to be easy. Not after everything we had built. The house, the memories, the life I thought we were sharing. No, this wasn't going to end quietly. And something in the pit of my stomach told me that Rachel's betrayal was just the beginning of what was to come. As I stood there, feeling my entire world crumble around me, a strange sense of clarity began to creep in. I realized that everything I thought I knew about Rachel, about our marriage, had been a carefully constructed lie. She didn't love me. She didn't even respect me. And yet, there was something deeper at play. This wasn't just about the affair with Justin. No, it felt more sinister. Like there was a layer of deceit that I hadn't uncovered yet. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. There was more to this story. Rachel, sensing my silence as an opening, started walking toward the kitchen, as if we'd finished a casual conversation about groceries. My head was spinning, but I wasn't about to let her walk away that easily. "Rachel," I said, my voice calm but hard. "What aren't you telling me?" She stopped mid-step and turned to look at me, her expression shifting slightly, as if calculating her next move. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear? No, it was something else. Guilt, maybe. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but the tone was off. She was too defensive, too quick to dismiss. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't just about you and Justin, is it?" I crossed my arms, standing my ground. How many others have there been? Or is this about more than just cheating? Her eyes narrowed. For the first time that night, I saw a crack in her cool exterior. She shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossing over her chest. "You're being paranoid." "Am I? Because something tells me you're not just bored. Rachel, you've been planning this, haven't you?" I wasn't sure where this sudden confidence came from, but my gut told me there was something bigger at play. The way she had been acting, the lies, the manipulative twists in our conversations. It all pointed to something far more calculated. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she gave me that icy stare again, but this time there was a hint of nervousness behind it. "I don't know what you think you're accusing me of, but you're out of line, Daniel." I took a step closer, my voice lowering. "No, I'm not. You've been playing games for a while now. You think I haven't noticed? The late nights, the secret phone calls, the sudden withdrawals from our joint account? You've been hiding something from me, and I'm done being in the dark." She flinched at the mention of the withdrawals. That was it, there was more. My heart raced as I pressed on. "What is it, Rachel? What's your endgame here?" Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was struggling to come up with a lie, but for once, she couldn't. She was cornered. "You're not as clueless as I thought," she finally muttered under her breath. And there it was, the confirmation I needed. She had been planning something far more malicious than just an affair. My hands trembled, but I clenched them into fists, trying to keep control. "So what is it? What have you been hiding from me?" Rachel let out a long sigh, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "All right, fine. You want the truth? You really want to know what's going on? I'm done pretending." I braced myself. This was the moment I had dreaded and anticipated all at once. "Justin isn't just some fling," she said, her voice dropping lower. "He's helping me. He's part of something bigger. I'm done with this life, Daniel. I'm done with you. I've been moving things around for a while now, and soon I'll be gone, with or without your blessing." I felt like I had been hit by a truck. The casual way she spoke about leaving, about moving things around, what the hell did that mean? "What are you talking about? Moving things around?" I asked, the anxiety growing in my chest. Rachel smiled then, a wicked, triumphant smile that sent chills down my spine. "I've been preparing to leave for months. The withdrawals, the fake investment accounts, they're all part of my plan. I'm not stupid. I knew this day would come, and when it did, I wasn't going to be left empty-handed." My blood ran cold. Fake investment accounts? Withdrawals? She had been siphoning money, hiding it right under my nose while I thought she was just being careless. And now she was ready to leave with a stash of my money, and apparently Justin was in on it too. "You've been stealing from me?" My voice shook with disbelief. Rachel shrugged, completely unapologetic. "Call it what you want. I call it ensuring my future. You didn't think I'd stick around forever, did you? Especially not with the way things have been." My mind was reeling. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated heist. A full-on plan to rob me blind and walk away without a second thought. And the worst part? I had been so wrapped up in my trust for her, so convinced that our problems were just the normal ups and downs of marriage, that I never saw it coming. "You're sick?" I muttered, the words barely escaping my lips. "Maybe," she said, her voice as cold as ever. "But I'm smart. And now that you know, there's nothing you can do to stop it. The money's already gone, Daniel. The accounts have been closed. And in a few weeks, I'll be too." I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around it. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was nothing but a cold-hearted thief. A liar who had spent months preparing for this moment. And now I was the one left picking up the pieces. I could hardly hear my own thoughts as Rachel's words echoed in my mind. "The accounts are closed. The money is gone. Everything we built was already shattered." But now I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. This wasn't just an affair. This was a well-calculated scheme, a full-scale destruction of everything I thought I knew. "How long have you been planning this?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking as the reality sunk in. Rachel leaned against the kitchen counter, her arms crossed, eyes cold and unbothered. "Does it matter? It's been long enough." I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, a mix of rage and heartbreak swirling inside me. I wanted to lash out, to scream at her, but I felt paralyzed. "You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you?" Rachel sighed, like this was the most tedious conversation she'd ever had. "Daniel, this isn't about us anymore. There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. You just didn't want to see it." Her words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. I felt my chest tighten, my breath shallow. The woman I had trusted, loved, built my life around was telling me, no, showing me, how little I meant to her. The sheer indifference in her voice, the way she spoke about our marriage like it was some dead-end contract, made me sick. "You could have just left," I said quietly, trying to suppress the anger that was bubbling up. "You didn't have to do this. Steal from me. Lie to me. You didn't have to tear everything apart." Rachel tilted her head, as if considering my words, and then she smiled, an infuriating, smug smile. "Why would I leave with nothing? I deserved more than what you were giving me. I didn't want your scraps. I wanted what I was owed." "Owed?" She was acting like she was entitled to everything I had worked for, like this was some kind of twisted transaction. I had loved her, supported her, did everything I could to make sure she had what she needed, and this was how she repaid me? "That's how you see it? You're owed something?" I laughed bitterly, feeling the anger rising despite my efforts to keep it down. "You think you're justified in stealing from me, cheating on me, and walking away without any consequences?" Rachel's smirk never wavered. "Yes, Daniel, I do. And whether you like it or not, there's nothing you can do about it now. The money is gone. I'm gone." Something in me snapped. I stepped closer to her, feeling my hands trembling with the overwhelming need for answers. "You think I'm just going to let you get away with this? You think I'm going to sit back while you destroy everything I've worked for?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by my intensity. "What's done is done. You can fight it all you want, but at the end of the day, I've already won." I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, but there was something in her voice, something that felt so final, that kept me rooted in place. She had won, hadn't she? She had outsmarted me, played me like a fool. And now I was left to pick up the broken pieces of the life we had. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could you be so heartless?" Rachel sighed again, like she was tired of my questions. Because, Daniel, I stopped caring a long time ago. I was tired of waiting for you to change. Tired of waiting for life to get exciting. So I made my own way. You were just part of the plan. Just part of the plan. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was never her partner, never the love of her life. I was just a piece in the puzzle, a stepping stone for her to get what she wanted. And I was the idiot who let her. You're disgusting, I muttered, unable to look at her anymore. Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't care. Think whatever you want. But in a few weeks, I'll be gone, and you'll be left wondering how you didn't see it coming. My blood boiled. The audacity, the sheer cruelty of her words was unbearable. But as much as I wanted to yell, to fight, to make her feel some kind of remorse, I knew it wouldn't matter. She was already gone. The woman I thought I married didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. There was a long silence between us, the tension thick in the air. I could feel the anger inside me like a storm waiting to explode, but I knew this confrontation wouldn't change anything. She had made her decision, and I was the one left holding the ashes. Then, as if the universe decided I hadn't been punished enough, there was a knock at the door. A loud, insistent knock that startled both of us. I turned toward the door, confused. Who the hell is that? Rachel's eyes widened just for a second, a flicker of something, panic, crossing her face. It was the first time I'd seen her unsettled all night. Don't answer it, she said quickly, too quickly, but I was already moving toward the door. My anger, my frustration, my need for control. It all pushed me to ignore her warning. I yanked the door open, not knowing what to expect, and standing there, in the dim light of the porch, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, muscular, with a grim expression on his face. Who are you? I asked, my mind racing. Was this another one of Rachel's men? Another piece of her twisted game? The man didn't answer right away. He looked past me, straight at Rachel, and I saw a flash of recognition in his eyes. He wasn't here for me. He was here for her. Rachel took a step back, her face pale now. What are you doing here? She demanded, her voice suddenly shaking. The man's expression darkened. We need to talk, Rachel. Now. And just like that, I realized this nightmare wasn't over. Not even close. The tension in the room spiked the moment the stranger stepped inside. His presence was like a cold wind cutting through the already frigid atmosphere between Rachel and me. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Who the hell was this guy? He looked out of place, yet completely sure of himself, like he knew exactly what he was doing there. And judging by the way Rachel's expression had shifted from smug to terrified, I realized that things were about to get even more complicated. Rachel, who had been so confident and indifferent moments ago, suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlights. She took a step back, her face pale, eyes darting between me and the stranger. I could see the panic rising in her, and it was a stark contrast to the woman who had just been telling me how she had won, how everything was going according to her plan. Now, for the first time, she seemed genuinely scared. What are you doing here? Rachel's voice was low, almost a hiss, as she stared at the man. Her previous calm was gone, replaced by an edge of desperation I hadn't heard before. The man's gaze didn't waver. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a hardened look about him, like someone who'd been through his fair share of fights and wasn't afraid of another one. His eyes were locked on Rachel, filled with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. Disappointment, maybe? I told you I'd be back, he said, his voice deep and steady, with just enough menace to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. You didn't think I'd just let this slide, did you? I felt a surge of confusion and anger welling up inside me. Who the hell is this guy, Rachel? I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. What's going on? Rachel didn't answer me right away. She was too busy glaring at the man, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I had never seen her like this, cornered, vulnerable. It was as if the stranger's arrival had shattered the last bit of control she thought she had over the situation. Shut up, Daniel, she snapped, turning her venom on me, though the fear still lingered in her voice. This has nothing to do with you. Like hell it doesn't. I shot back, my patience wearing thin. You've been lying to me for months, Rachel. And now you've got some guy showing up at our door in the middle of the night, acting like he owns the place? I think it has everything to do with me. The man let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. I guess he doesn't know, huh? Rachel's eyes narrowed. Don't. But it was too late. My curiosity, fueled by the anger still boiling inside me, wasn't going to let this go. Doesn't know what? I demanded, stepping closer to Rachel. What the hell is going on? The man turned to me, finally acknowledging my presence with a smirk that made my skin crawl. I'm surprised she didn't tell you, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. I figured she'd be bragging about it by now. After all, Rachel's pretty good at playing people. Rachel's face hardened, but she said nothing. Tell me what? I asked, my heart racing. I had a sinking feeling that whatever he was about to say would be the final nail in the coffin of our already crumbling marriage. The man leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms as if he had all the time in the world. She owes me. A lot. And by the looks of it, she's been using you to pay off her debt. My stomach dropped. Debt? What debt? The man's smirk deepened. Rachel's been in over her head for a while now. Gambling, mostly. Bad choices, bad company. She needed a way out and fast. So she found herself a nice, naive husband to help clean up her mess. That's you, by the way. I felt like the room was spinning. Gambling? Debt? I looked at Rachel, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. But when our eyes met, I saw the truth there. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. You've been using me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as the weight of her betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. This whole time, Rachel's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. That silence was all the answer I needed. Wow, I muttered, running a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. I knew you were selfish, Rachel, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. The man pushed off the doorframe, taking a step closer. She owes a lot of people, Daniel. I'm just one of them, and I'm here to collect. I don't owe you anything, Rachel finally snapped, her voice trembling. I've paid off most of it. You're just trying to squeeze me for more. The man shrugged. You know how the game works. You pay off one debt and another one shows up. That's how it goes when you're reckless. But the difference now is you're out of options. I was barely listening to them at this point. My head was spinning, the weight of everything crashing down on me. Rachel had been gambling. She had debts. She had been using my money, our life, to bail herself out of whatever hole she had dug. And now this guy, whoever he was, had shown up to make sure she paid the price. The man turned to me again. If I were you, I'd get as far away from her as possible. She's toxic, and she's only going to drag you down with her. I didn't need to be told twice. But part of me, the part that had loved Rachel for years, couldn't believe this was really happening. That she could be so cold, so manipulative. What do you want from her? I asked, my voice weak. The man didn't hesitate. I want what I'm owed. And if she can't give me that, well, let's just say things could get ugly. I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to respond, but she just stood there silent, as if she had finally run out of excuses, out of lies. The stranger's threat hung heavy in the air, but all I could think about was how much of my life had been wasted on a woman who had never really loved me. A woman who had been playing me from the start. Rachel's gaze flicked toward me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something. Guilt? Regret? Fear? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. Get out, I said, my voice flat, but firm. Both of you. Get out of my house. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, but I didn't give her a chance to speak. I turned and headed for the stairs, needing to put as much distance between us as possible. The weight of everything pressed down on me, suffocating, but one thing was clear. I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. Done with Rachel. I heard the man's footsteps behind me, followed by the sound of the door closing as they left. And for the first time that night, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I had finally broken free of the nightmare that had consumed my life. But as I reached the top of the stairs, a new thought entered my mind, one that made my blood run cold. What was I supposed to do next? The silence after they left was deafening. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had just unfolded. My world, my entire life, had been ripped apart in the span of a few hours. Rachel's betrayal, the lies, the debt. It was all too much to take in. And now, with them gone, I was left with the debris of what I thought was a marriage. The house felt emptier than it had ever felt before, despite the fact that Rachel had only just walked out. I had been living with a stranger for years, someone who had been deceiving me in ways I couldn't even imagine. The fact that she was gone should have brought me some kind of peace, but all I felt was numb. I moved to the bedroom, slumping onto the edge of the bed. Everything around me was a reminder of the life we'd built together. Photos of our wedding, the furniture we'd picked out, her clothes hanging neatly in the closet. It all felt like a cruel joke now. None of it was real. It was all part of some elaborate game Rachel had been playing, a life built on lies. I buried my head in my hands, trying to hold back the wave of emotions threatening to break me. The anger, the disbelief, the heartbreak. It all came crashing down at once. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? The late nights, the strange phone calls, the distant look in her eyes whenever I tried to connect with her. It was all there, but I had been too stupid, too trusting to see it. The weight of it all hit me then. Rachel wasn't just a liar. She had been actively plotting behind my back, siphoning money, making deals, gambling away our future, while I was cluelessly trying to make things work. She didn't love me. She never had. I was just a pawn in her game, a means to an end. And that stranger at the door, who the hell was he really? Some debt collector? Some thug she had crossed paths with during her wild escapades? I had no idea. All I knew was that he had shown up with a threat, and Rachel had been genuinely scared. For all her bravado, for all the lies she had spun, she had been caught off guard by him. That told me everything I needed to know. Whatever mess she was involved in, it was far from over. I needed answers. I needed to figure out what she had done, where the money had gone, and how deep this rabbit hole went. The only problem was, I didn't even know where to start. I glanced around the room, my eyes falling on Rachel's purse, which she had left behind in her haste to leave. The thought of going through her things made me sick, but I knew I had no choice. I couldn't trust her anymore, and whatever she had been hiding, I needed to find it. With shaky hands, I opened her purse, rifling through the usual clutter. Makeup, her phone, receipts. Then I found it. A small, black notebook, tucked away at the bottom, as if she didn't want anyone to find it. My heart pounded as I flipped it open, hoping it would give me some kind of clue. The pages were filled with scribbled numbers, dates, and notes. At first, it didn't make any sense, but as I kept reading, the picture became clearer. These weren't just random numbers. They were amounts, large sums of money, some crossed out, others circled. Next to each amount were initials: JL, DM, SP. The list went on and on. It hit me like a ton of bricks. These were people, probably the same people Rachel owed money to. And these weren't small debts. These were thousands upon thousands of dollars. Far more than I had ever imagined she could have gambled away. One name stood out, circled multiple times: Justin L. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Justin, the young guy I had walked in on that night, the one she had been so casual about. It wasn't just an affair. He was tied to this mess too. Was he in on it from the start? Was he part of her grand scheme? Or was he just another pawn in her twisted game? I didn't have answers yet, but what I did have was a growing sense of dread. If this was just a fraction of the people Rachel owed money to, then we were in far deeper trouble than I could have ever imagined. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. For a second, panic gripped me. Was it the man again? Had he come back to finish what he started? My heart raced as I slowly made my way to the door, my mind spinning with all the possible scenarios. I peeked through the peephole and felt a wave of relief when I saw a familiar face. My neighbor, Greg. I opened the door, trying to compose myself. Greg was a good guy, mid-40s, the kind of person who always had a friendly word to say. But tonight, he looked uneasy. "Hey, Daniel," Greg said, shifting uncomfortably. "I hate to bother you this late, but I saw something earlier that I thought you should know about." My pulse quickened. "What is it, Greg?" He scratched the back of his neck, clearly unsure of how to say it. "Earlier tonight, I saw Rachel leaving with some guy. It wasn't the first time either. He's been coming around a lot lately, always late at night. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you should know." The knot in my stomach tightened. So it had been going on longer than I even realized. Not just with Justin, but possibly others. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating. "Thanks for telling me, Greg," I said, my voice strained. I appreciate it." Greg nodded, clearly sensing the tension. "If you need anything, just let me know. I'm right next door." I closed the door behind him, feeling the walls closing in. The notebook in my hand felt heavier now. This wasn't just about Rachel's affair. This was bigger, darker, and I was smack in the middle of it. For the first time that night, I realized that I might not just be dealing with a broken marriage. I was dealing with something far more dangerous. I stood there, staring down at the black notebook, my mind spinning with the weight of it all. Rachel wasn't just a liar or a cheat. She was a con artist, and I had been nothing but a tool in her elaborate scheme. But it wasn't just the emotional betrayal that gnawed at me anymore. It was the sheer scale of what she'd done. The money, the debts, the danger that now hovered over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was nothing but an illusion. I couldn't keep living in the wreckage of her lies. The cold, hard truth settled in my chest. Rachel wasn't coming back. She had already moved on, already dug herself into a deeper hole than I could ever pull her out of. But I wasn't going to be her victim any longer. I spent the next few hours poring over every detail in that notebook. The names, the amounts, the coded references that all pointed to one terrifying realization. Rachel wasn't just in debt. She was in deep with people who didn't forgive and didn't forget. The man who had shown up earlier was just the tip of the iceberg. There were more, far worse people on her trail, and they would come for her. But if I didn't act quickly, they'd come for me too. And that was when I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for them to destroy me along with her. If Rachel had taught me anything, it was that you had to play the game smart if you wanted to survive. And now it was my turn to make my move. I packed a small bag, leaving everything else behind. The house, the memories, the mess. None of it mattered anymore. I grabbed the notebook and headed out the door, locking it behind me as if I was sealing away the life I'd once had. As I drove through the dark, empty streets, my mind raced with what I had to do next. There was no going to the police. Not yet. Rachel's web of lies was too tangled, and I had no idea how deep her manipulation went. No, I needed to get ahead of this, to figure out a way to protect myself from the storm that was coming. But I wasn't just thinking about survival anymore. I was thinking about justice, or maybe it was revenge. I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began, but I knew one thing. I was done being the fool in Rachel's game. I drove for hours, the city giving way to empty highways, the lights of civilization fading into the distance. I knew exactly where I was going. There was only one person who could help me now, one person who would understand what I needed to do next. It wasn't easy, but sometimes you had to turn to those you never thought you'd need. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the small, rundown bar on the edge of town, the sun was starting to rise. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But this time it wasn't fear that gripped me. It was determination. I walked inside, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hitting me instantly. The place was nearly empty, just a few early morning regulars nursing their drinks. And then I saw him, Tom, my old friend from years ago. A guy who knew how to operate in the shadows, who had connections in places that weren't exactly legal. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew I had no other choice. Tom looked up as I approached, his face hard but curious. He gestured for me to sit, his eyes narrowing when he saw the look on my face. Well, 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 he said, his voice gravelly. Look who's come crawling back. What's the matter, Daniel? Life too soft for you now? I shook my head, feeling the notebook heavy in my hands. I need your help, Tom. I've got a problem. A big one. He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. You don't say. What kind of problem? I handed him the notebook, and he flipped through the pages, his expression turning serious as he read. When he looked back at me, there was no trace of humor left in his eyes. This is bad, he said, his voice low. These people, you don't mess with them, Daniel. You're playing with fire. I know, I replied, my voice steady for the first time all night. But I'm not the one who lit the match. Rachel did. Tom let out a long breath, closing the notebook and setting it down on the table. He looked me dead in the eye. So what do you want to do about it? Run? Hide? Or do you want to fight back? I thought about it for a moment, but the answer had already formed in my mind. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I had spent too long being Rachel's puppet, and now it was time to cut the strings. I want to fight back, I said, my voice cold, resolved. But I need your help. Tom studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, you're in deep, but I can get you out. It won't be clean and it won't be easy, but I'll help you. Relief washed over me, but there was no time to celebrate. I knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger war, one that would require everything I had left. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I was the one calling the shots. Rachel had underestimated me, just like she had underestimated everyone else. Tom stood up, grabbing his coat. Let's get to work, then. First, we need to track her down. If you want to take control of this mess, you're going to need to confront her one last time. I nodded, knowing he was right. I wasn't done with Rachel yet. Not by a long shot. But this time, I wasn't the one being played. I was about to end the game.